One of the most frequently asked questions we get at BEMA is about the path of education. Where should I go to seminary? How do I study this stuff? What should I do? And unfortunately, I won't be able to give you a ton of answers in this video because there's no particular path that gets you where you're trying to go. There's so many things that play into it. I don't know you at all, or your context, or how you're wired, or what you're coming out of, or what you're headed into. What are your goals and objectives? There are so many things. This isn't nearly as simple or as easy as just picking a seminary, going through that program, getting a degree, and now you know this stuff. So, first of all, I didn't do that. I didn't. So whatever I were to tell you would not be anything that I've ever done. I would be speaking completely out of experience, because I didn't study any of this stuff at a seminary. I didn't get to go to any of the universities that I would have liked to have gone to. And so that somewhat kind of is a case in point to what I was just saying. There's no one path that gets you there, and there's no path that doesn't get you there, which probably isn't true. There are probably lots of paths that don't get you there. But I took a path where I got to study, under Ray Vanderlaan for those 3 years that I got to go on some trips with him, and he came to our church and was able to share some of those things and bibliography, and just brief moments, but I got to learn so much from him. I soaked up what little opportunities I had, and it pointed me in a direction, and it gave me some tools and resources. And obviously, you don't get to manufacture that or duplicate that experience. And that was somewhat unique to me. And yet the things that I've done, almost anybody could do if you had the right direction. And that's part of what the podcast is designed to do, is to point you in a direction and teach you, share with you what I learned in some similar ways, and point you to all the resources that you could learn that stuff. On some level, you can learn this without a seminary, without a degree. It also comes without a certain sense of pedigree, without a stamp, an academic stamp, without letters after your name. And so there are lots of times where you do want to go to a seminary. You do want to get that degree. There are lots of reasons why you would go on a lot of those paths, but those are paths that I have not walked. And so I can't necessarily share those things with you. Now I can tell you this. I can share with you some things that I know. If you wanted to study like this Jewish history context thing that we're talking about, you could go over to Jerusalem in Israel and study there. The two universities that I would recommend is Jerusalem University College, JUC, is a great place for especially people from the United States to go get started. They have a couple entry programs and certificates. And studies that get you in. You don't have to know Hebrew. You don't have to, it's built for people, international students like yourself, to get in there, study, learn a whole bunch of stuff on a really entry level basis. But the university that I always wanted to be able to study at and never got the opportunity, I could have, but my life just never went in that direction, is Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So Hebrew University, is probably, in my opinion, one of the finest institutions when it comes to the best biblical archaeology, the best biblical studies institution on the planet, in my opinion. Lots of people would argue with that. Its rival university is Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv has a much more liberal, much more higher textual criticism, assumes, I don't want to say doesn't take the Bible seriously, but doesn't take it seriously it's just an academic exercise. It's not a faith exercise, where Hebrew University is at least going to be a little bit more what you call maximalistic in what it assumes about the scriptures. Some might say more conservative in some regards. So that's where I always wanted to study. I wanted to study somewhere where I could get a biblical studies, study the archaeology from a place that assumed much of the scriptures and took the Bible seriously. And Hebrew University is where I always wanted to go. So JUC is where you would start. Hebrew University is going to require you to have a working knowledge of Hebrew. You're going to have to be able to speak Hebrew, because they're not going to do classes in English. So again, these are tricky things. These are tricky hurdles to get over. Are you going to move all the way over there, live in Israel, learn how to speak Hebrew? But if you are, then there are some great ways to do that. A lot of people will start at JUC and take Hebrew classes so they can learn how to speak Hebrew and set themselves up in a year or two to then move over to Hebrew University. Lots of my friends and colleagues have done that, and that's a great roadmap. As far as academia in the States, there are great archaeological programs at places like the University of Michigan. I would also say one of the ways that you can pursue academia is to find the teacher that you like. So you might be a fan of Amy Jill Levine and want to go study with her at her university. You might be a fan of Peter Enns and you want to go study underneath him. Like there are these teachers, these professors, these scholars that are residents at a particular university, and you get to go there and study under those specialists, underneath those particular experts by going and studying there. So that's another way to go about. Find the teacher that you like and then go study in. You might not be able to take necessarily classes with them, but you could study in their department. You could study around them or adjacent to the work that they're doing. And that's a part of how you can study too. The other way to do it is to find just a general seminary that's going to have a general degree and give you classes that are pointed in the general direction. So it's less specific. It's less like a lot of things are narrow and deep when it comes to expertise. Then there's things that are a little bit less deep and a little bit more broad, but still pointing you in the right direction. And for me, I would always look at places like Fuller Seminary, where is a place that's going to have a very diverse faculty, very diverse staff. It's not locked into one Christian tradition, but it's got a little bit more diverse theological perspective. So Fuller Seminary would be an option. A lot of people have gone to Liberty. Obviously, Liberty has a particular reputation as an institution, but academically, Liberty is actually pretty wide as far as the diversity of thought and the different things you can learn there. Even theologically, Liberty is far more diverse than the person might assume. Worth looking at. Obviously, lots of people have gone to places like Dallas Theological Seminary or Southwestern Baptist, and those are places that if you come from that tradition and that's where you're wanting to stay, if that's your home, then those decisions make a lot of sense. But that education is going to be kind of pointed in a little bit more specific direction. I've been told that Denver Theological Seminary has a great biblical studies program. I've also been told the exact opposite by some people. So take that for what it's worth. At the end of the day, here's what I'm trying to say. I could never give you the blueprint, the map for how to get from here to there, because there's lots of different ways to get there, and so much of it depends on who you are, where you're coming from, where you're trying to go, what you're willing to do, what's important to you, and how you're going to get there. So a lot of the things I've discussed in this video are all potential options. I can't give you any more than that. I'll be a very poor guide at getting you beyond that point. But maybe there are things in this video as you watch it, maybe you watch it again and you listen. What are the things that make you go, oh yeah, that does make a lot of sense. There is that scholar, and they do actually teach at that university, and I could go study there. Or maybe it's I do want to go move to Israel and study. Like I want to actually go study at the places where the archaeological digs are happening. Maybe it's I actually do want a very specific degree. Maybe I want a wider degree. Maybe I want to also learn how to be a pastor as I'm studying these things. Well, then you do want to go to a seminary. You do want to get an MDiv. You do want to pursue something that's not so narrow and specific. Of course, if you want something I want to study Second Temple Judaism and learn from that, well, then that conversation is going to be something that you probably want to not get an MDiv. You want to find a program that is specifically pointed towards that expertise. So there's a million ways to answer that question. And I'm sorry that it's not easier. And I know people write in and they want an easy answer to that question. That question is just impossible for somebody like our team to answer for you. But maybe there are some helpful tools there in that conversation. And I hope it's a good thing. Whatever you do with your life, whether you just read a bunch of books like me for the next 20 years, or whether you end up overseas studying in a foreign land, or whether you end up at a seminary right next door or online. I hope that God blesses your journey and you end up in places that you never could have seen yourself back at the beginning of your story.